Hello and welcome. My name is Joe O'Mara. I'm the Head of Aviation Finance with KPMG. And on behalf of KPMG and Airline Economics, I'm delighted to be joined by Olivier Trauchessec. Olivier is the Head of Global Aviation with MUFG. He's joining us for the purpose of our Aviation Leaders Report 2025, and we're recording this in the middle of October in New York. Olivier, thanks again for joining us for the purpose of the report.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, same. Before we get into the meat of the conversation, do you want to tell our watchers just the role MUFG plays in aviation finance?
Well, thanks for having me. First, it's good to be with you and with the Airline Economics team today. Look, I think MUFG in aviation is really the way we try to position ourselves is really a solution provider. We're here to help our clients really when they need us the most. We've built a business which is really relationship focused. We're here basically to help our clients on any projects where, for example, they need to they're building their business. If they are acquiring another business, they're buying a portfolio of aircraft, maybe they are turning their business, or to be honest with you, if there's another crisis, because we know in aviation there are always crises, so we want to be there when they need us the most. That's the way to think about us, and we've done a lot of work like to build bring in new products, onboard new clients, and at the end of the day, we're a bank, so we lend, right? And we're comfortable lending, so that's how we want people to think about us, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And maybe if we start across your assessment of airline performance, and can you talk to us how we've seen that evolve over 2024, and just are there interesting developments from a geographic perspective on the airline side?
Yes, so it's interesting because we came out of COVID where people were very keen to travel. There was a very strong and quick recovery. A bit even quicker than expected. I remember people saying during COVID that things would come back to normal by 2024, even later. And at the end of the day, we saw that by 2023 things were really, really strong. So a bit different maybe between regions. Like it started with the Americas, then going further east, EMEA, and finally APAC. Still maybe some weaknesses. A little bit in China, but it came back very strongly. Then we had also a difference between passenger categories, right? Like it was first the travelers going for tourism. Then it became more our friends and relatives. Then it became more corporate travelers, and we're almost back basically to where we were before COVID. Some situation even be better than pre-COVID. Maybe when you see the situation now, some airlines have got themselves a bit ahead of themselves basically. They have we've seen situation where people have put too much capacity in their respective markets. So it's created a situation where they've had a hard time on the revenue side even. There's also obviously some cost pressures inflation, fuel price, although fuel price has not been as bad as we could have expected with the tensions in the Middle East, and employee costs obviously have been an issue. So it's kind of interesting to see the dynamics of the market where after a strong recovery, we're saying things tempering down a little bit, and then still some pressure on the cost side, and then obviously issues around deliveries of aircraft, which makes it difficult for the airline from an operational point of view. So still quite a few challenges there.
Yeah, and I guess you touched on a couple of points there around the macroeconomic environment they're operating in and some of the geopolitical risk that's in the market at the moment. your concerns or otherwise that you'd have looking out at the 25 across that maybe macroeconomic and geopolitical threat piece?
From our point of view at the bank, but also I think that's shared with many other banks or the investors, it's business as usual. We're continuing to support our clients in the region. If things get worse, we may have to reassess, but as things stand now, it's business as usual. And things could move obviously quickly, but we'll keep an eye on that. Then we're going to continue looking at how airlines are managing their capacity. Again, like those two trends between maybe aircraft availability, which may impose some discipline in a way, in a positive way. But also maybe some airlines overdoing it a little bit in terms of capacity. And we've seen the situation, right? What's really interesting is what's happening with the low-cost airlines now, where like the business model is being challenged in the US, and maybe it may come to Europe at some point as well. Yeah.
And one point you touched on there a couple of moments ago, Olivier, is around the supply side challenges. As you mentioned, there's an element of that putting some capacity discipline on airlines, to your point, but would you have broader concerns? Obviously, as we sit here in mid-October, we still have Boeing on strike. Hopefully that will resolve itself in short order, but you're still in a situation now where deliveries are not where they were, pre-2019. How concerned are you as you look at the broader aviation finance market that those supply side challenges might drive?
So I think the airlines are overall very reactive, and they've been able to manage the situation pretty well. It's very difficult because often they're really having a hard time assessing when they can take the delivery of the aircraft. Sometimes they have no idea on how many months it's going to take for the aircraft to deliver. So it makes it very difficult to plan. But they've been able to find make some adjustments. Some use SCMI to boost capacity or to make up for the lost capacity. Some of them are extending the lease. We hear a lot of anecdotal evidence of aircraft lessors being asked to extend the lease very early, way earlier than they used to, and so you almost wonder how the life expectancy of an aircraft now. We used to say, we were starting to say, well, now it's 25 years. That you can operate an aircraft. Maybe is that going to be even longer than that? Can we go much longer than that? So it's interesting to see that it's creating some issues. Clearly, for the aircraft lessors, it's creating some opportunities. But overall, I find the airlines have been able to manage well and to avoid situation where it creates some major operational issues and where it would affect their financials as well.
Yeah, and maybe moving on to the financing side, we had this conversation a year ago around interest rates. We had the kind of whiplash of the rate rises from 22 and into 23. Excuse me, in 22 and into 23. And we probably had a talk of, we're in a higher for longer period. As we sit here in October, we're starting to see rate cuts. Can you talk to me about your assessment on what the interest rate environment is like and the overall impact that's having on the sector?
Yes, sure. So I think so far it's, we saw the rate cut of 50 basis points, which, by the way, MUFG was one of the two banks who basically had expected that level of a cut. So eventually, right, it's going to be helpful for everyone. We were at a point where, sometimes in an elevated market, you see, excuse me, rate environment, it creates a bit of discipline, right? So because people have to be careful about how they raise financing and at what trading level you can purchase or sell aircraft. We expect basically the trend to continue, right? Like the decrease, of rates, although it may take a bit longer than we expected. Eventually, like it's going to be helpful for the airlines from a cost point of view. They will see like lower cost of funding, and it should trickle down into like the leasing space as well. The issue with the lessors, I think, is that because there's so much competition, there's so much capital chasing opportunities, we haven't seen really like during the higher rate environment such an increase in lease rate factors, which you would have expected, right? So it's really affected like their margins at the end of the day. And when you have like less margins, your ability to generate capital like from your business is lower. So that could create some issues for some of them in terms of like having enough capital to purchase more aircraft. But eventually, they will benefit from the lower rate environment, which we'll see, although at a slower pace than expected. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe another really important element of the financing market is the unsecured bond market. Can I get your thoughts and perspectives as to how accessible that market is for large-scale lessors and on the airline side?
Yeah. Well, so the unsecured market, like it's most of the leasing companies are targeting investment grade, which is really where you want to be in the space. The benefit of the unsecured bond market is that it's competitive in terms of pricing, but also like from an amortization point of view, those are bonds that you are bullets, right? So you don't have like the amortization element. The capital markets in the US is this year we're expecting in the high grade market, the investment grade market, 1.4 trillion of issuance. So that's like the deeper, most available, where you see most trading. So that's a very competitive market. We're going to continue to see like people issuing in that market from a refinancing point of view, or because they're receiving new aircraft. It's very deep. I don't see any issues whatsoever in this market. That being said, we talked to some of our clients who want to diversify their source of funding. So they do plan to issue sometimes in euros, in Canadian dollars, in other currencies. So I think that makes sense for when you have an international business like that to do that. But what I would say is like the ABS market, which is coming back, and I'm sure you'll want to speak about that as well, is actually pretty competitive as well. You compare an issuance by an investment grade lessor to an issuance with a lessor who tapped the ABS market. Well, one is unsecured, one is secured, one is recourse, the other one is non-recourse. So there's pros and cons. Maybe there's less amortization when you do an unsecured bond, but at the end of the day, it's close. So it's two different approach. And it can make sense also just to tap the ABS market to finance your aircraft as well.
Yeah, maybe we'll touch on ABS. As you're right, it's later down my list, but let's move it up, right? Because when we're on the capital markets, really, really strong market pre-COVID. Market shutters, comes back very strongly, probably quicker than we thought. You have the Russian challenges, you have interest rate challenges, shutters, and as we sit here in October, we've now seen probably half a dozen deals get done again. Can you talk to me about how important you think that market is for aviation finance and your outlook as to how it will develop over maybe the next 12 months or so?
You're talking about the ABS market?
ABS market,
yeah. So on the ABS market, so I think it's slowly coming back, but surely coming back. MUFG was left lead structuring agent of 2 ABS recently for BBAM and for Sky Leasing. So we've seen it firsthand, right? Like it's a market where investors obviously are cautious, right? But it made sense to start, with a portfolio of new aircraft, good lessees, and then maybe do like an A tranche that would be priced very competitively. Make it as big as possible. We're starting to see B tranche now, and it's interesting how some of the issuance recently, we used to see like a big differentials between the pricing of an A and a B of up to 100 basis points. Now it's even shrunk. So very competitive market. Evan, go ahead.
Just one question on that. The LTVs we're seeing. So it's very interesting to see the Bs come back. What kind of LTV are they getting pushed to?
I think you can you'll be able to. You're still like below 70% for the A's, but above for the B's. And then you see it's also which appraisers do you use, obviously, right? Like the ABS market is more open maybe than the bank market with some of the appraisers. So I think comparing like the two markets, I think you can do quite well on the ABS market. You can do volume also. You can do also amortization. We've seen some of the recent deals like 20-year amortization, which makes it competitive. Pricing also makes more sense now. And yes, maybe eventually we may see some C tranche being issued. I think we're pretty far away, still a bit far away from seeing some E-notes, some equity tranches. But yeah, I think it's a market that's really coming back nicely and strongly.
Yeah, and maybe moving back to the traditional aviation banking market, which you're obviously very familiar with. Can I get your overall assessment of how healthy that market is?
I would say so. It's very strong for the tier one airlines and also for new aircraft. In this market, you see some of the traditional banks playing, like the French banks, some Asian banks also, even some maybe US regional banks. So very strong. Then when it comes to maybe like second tier airlines or leasing companies, or when you look at older aircraft, that becomes more challenging. You know, some of the banks are very focused on doing new aircraft only, or very recent aircraft. So more challenging to do older aircraft. So yeah, then it comes to specialty lending, right? Like so for us at MUFG, we are also a specialty lender, right? We bought DVB in 2019. We integrated the DVB's business model with a research team, an asset management team, and an advisory team. So we can we play in that market very actively, and we see it's through like some of the credit fund, which we can talk about also coming in the space.
Mm-hmm. And maybe keeping on the traditional banking side of the minute, and it's interesting to hear those kind of geographic trends. From a product perspective, what type of banking products are people availing of?
I think that banks are comfortable with the traditional aircraft financing, term loans, and they can do still like it's more difficult, I would say, for the banks to do the 12 years financing, like allocating capital for a very long time is a bit punitive, because you price it at a certain level, but then like it can change over time, and it may affect your profitability. So banks would like to see like a shorter maturity. Their cost of fund would be more competitive as well. Sweet spot I would say is really like 8 years, if possible. So the JOLCO market continues to be very active as well. You do see banks coming into warehouse facilities, not only like investment banks actually. Like it's interesting how some banks are just happy to enter warehouse facilities because they like the structure and the profitability of those facilities. And a lot of airlines have access to revolving credit facilities as well. We see that a lot in the US airlines, some Latin American airlines, and European airlines. Some airlines, to be frank with you, in some regions can do unsecured as well. It's unsecured bank facilities, sometimes with the support of a strong local bank market as well. We do see that. So yeah, that's what I would say for those for the banks.
So now a decent variation there across the product piece. You touched on it a little bit there, but the alternative lenders, which we've seen a number. You mentioned your own ability to kind of play in that slightly different space. Your perspectives on the alternative lenders. We've seen some of the private equity-backed lending houses coming at aviation in recent years. How important a market do you think that is, and is it one that you think will grow into the future?
So for now, we do see some alternative lenders being active. It's interesting because in the financial industry, the private credit has grown much more significantly than what we've seen in aviation. So it's pretty small now compared to what we see in the rest of the financial industry. They are like relevant players, but they have limitations, right? Often, they are supported. They need like a warehouse facility to provide their funding, which is provided by banks. So they have this limitation. Some of them need to do CLOs. So for it has to fit into like the CLO parameters, and for clients, they have to think about like having to deal with CLO investors on a going forward basis. And from a pricing point of view, I guess they're expensive, right? That's the issue. They don't necessarily take also a relationship approach, right? Like they're going to be there for a transaction, and will they be there for the next one, or when the clients need them the most? So it is something that we see. We see some being active, but from our point of view, I think it's better to deal with an experienced aviation bank like MUFG, who has all the capabilities and who is relationship focused, and who will be there like in good times and bad times, basically.
Yeah, so more of a niche product that will probably be a tool for some lessors to access, but again, probably not going to take a significant amount of market share based on those challenges. Just shifting gears a little bit, Olivier, your perspectives around the sustainability agenda and the challenges that come with climate change. Is it having a real impact on aviation finance, either in the ability and how you price debt, or your ability to attract investors? Are we seeing it have a meaningful impact?
Okay. Well, I think that definitely for the banks, it's top of mind. MUFG, for example, is part of Impact, one of the industry groups who's very focused on like finding like the right metrics, basically to achieve like the net zero in 2050. So we're also part of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, where we came up this year with our targets of where we want to be in terms of carbon intensity of our portfolio by 2030, and where we want to be, how we want to achieve net zero. So that means that I think the main effect is some banks focusing more on new aircraft, like I was saying earlier, or more recent aircraft. For us, we've been able to manage it. We have such a large portfolio that we're still able to finance like some older aircraft because from a total carbon intensity point of view, we're still able to reduce as a total amount. So that should have an effect with some of the banks with the smaller portfolios, I would say. Investors, for now, to be honest with you, it's not very high on the list. When it comes to like all asset class, whether it's DCM, ABS, private placement, we don't have this consideration, and I'm being very, 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 very honest with you. So in terms of tapping the capital markets, we haven't seen like a negative effect.
Yeah, and I think that's consistent with what we'd hear from others as well around it. Just in closing, Olivier, as we look out into 2025, what are your optimism levels like?
Very optimistic. I think that for people who have been in the business for a long time and who see, the ups and downs of the industry, we're still it's still a very good trend. We have to be careful, right? Because there will be another crisis for sure in aviation. There's one coming in a number of years. So whatever business you do now, you'll have to manage it in a crisis situation. But at the end of the day, if you invest in the right aircraft, the right airlines, under the right structure, you will be okay. And we've survived like COVID, which was the worst crisis ever. And during COVID, there was massive support from governments. It really showed. It was so obvious how governments supported the airlines. It's like part of their infrastructure at the end of the day. To be able to for a country, you need an airline to go in and out of a country. You need an airline also to trade for goods and service, for goods to move goods around, right? So a country is always going to support its airline in one way or another, maybe more or less, but you see that. And the capital markets also remain open so extensively during COVID. So it's very encouraging to see how we survived COVID and we came back so strongly. We just have obviously to be careful and diligent on our approach. But the aviation industry is a strong industry. It's supported by very strong stakeholders like the financiers, the investors, the governments, and so I'm very optimistic. Yes.
Well, on that hopeful note, I'd like to thank you as always for your time and insight.
Thank you.
And wish you and MUFG a very successful 2025.
Thank you, Joe.